Hey, Travis, Stas Margaronis on with me now, and great to have him on board. We're going to talk about news, as you would imagine, with this being a radio news show, coast to coast and border to border. And he is a reporter at the American Journal of Transportation. And Stas, it's great to have you on the radio, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
I appreciate you jumping in. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. We had a little tsunami warning on the West Coast this morning, but nothing got rattled that I know about.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I had the chief meteorologist on from the Department of Homeland Security, and she was talking about that phenomenon of a tsunami and what goes on. And some areas getting waves of like 10 feet, some getting 5. But, man, it's a serious event. That folks, when they do hear about those warnings, do need to take heed. Well, I'm glad you're okay. And tell folks about what you do at the American Journal of Transportation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. I am the California ports reporter. I cover the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, and I also cover the Pacific Northwest ports of Tacoma and Seattle. And we have had a very busy year, Mark, because the impact of the tariffs.
Yeah, the impact of the tariff situation, right? I mean, that's keeping a lot of folks up at night and morning and midday, to say the very least. So what do you say is the overall consensus with the Port of LA and Long Beach? I know at the beginning of the year, Stas, at LA Long Beach saw this huge influx of freight coming in from shippers overseas trying to get their goodies in before the deadlines kicked in. Are we seeing same thing going on at this point, or is it rolled back a bit as far as the inflow goes?
Mark, we're expecting the second half of 2025 to be substantially lower. All of the projections are moving in a downward direction. As you alluded, many of the big shippers front-loaded their imports early on in the year so that they could defense against higher tariffs at the end of the year. We have been talking to different shippers. A very, very large shipper representative told me that he expects their prices are going to start jumping in September. The imports that they front-loaded are through, and they're going to have to adjust upwards for the new tariff rates.
Stas, this sounds like it may be a dismal Christmas. Any predictions on that? Prices going higher, maybe the goods might or might not be available out there. Any projection on the retail side as to maybe what this impact might be? Any thoughts on that? What are you hearing?
Yeah, Mark, you're absolutely spot on. Number one, prices are going to start going up. There's been a lot in the media about the fact that we haven't seen much evidence of inflation, but these things don't happen overnight. There was a lot of front loading that kind of defensed against a higher rate. Things are going to start going up, we're hearing. And the other thing that we're hearing is there's going to be a shortage of items because not everything is going to sell. There have been disruptions in orders. It's been very difficult for people to figure out who's on first in terms of the tariffs. First, we had very high tariffs on China. Then they got lower, then very high tariffs on Japan, then they got lower. And one of the things that's happening is that there's also starting to create some economic impacts on our truckers because they've had to deal with things going up and going down. And in the last 2 weeks, Mark, we've lost at the Port of Oakland two of our quite well-known harbor truckers.
My golly, and to that standpoint, Stas, for those that are remaining, if the say, for example, that there's simply just not goods to be unloaded onto trucks because of the tariff situation, manufacturing, that means that the men and women that are working on the trade side, trucking side, you're not getting paid, right? If there's no freight to move off, they're not getting money, are they?
They aren't. Now, right now, the volumes are still not at a critical issue. But one of the problems, Mark, and I know everybody gets this, when there are fluctuations and one week it's good and the other week it's bad, it starts to be a problem because you don't have any certainty, and it's hard to defense when you don't know which way is up.
Yeah, and how is labor viewing all of this as far as the ports are concerned? Are we kind of in a period of relative calm as far as labor negotiations, contracts signed? Could this be maybe an ominous sign of labor negotiations they're going to be getting underway in the next year or so? Will the tariff situation factor in to any of the negotiations? What does labor say about this?
The International Longshore and Warehouse Union issued a statement about 2 or 3 months ago, Mark, and they are very, very down on the tariffs. They consider the tariffs to be a tax and a tax on working people. And the ILWU issued a very strong statement saying that it was a regressive tax. Essentially, rich people are not impacted, but poor and working people are going to be hurt. And they took a very strong position on this.
Yeah, and this is, I think, raising concerns among consumers, about the fact there could be price increases going on, the fact that there could be some of those shortages going on, like you're mentioning. Now, with all of that focus being on the West Coast, do you find, or have you found maybe or talked to companies that have decided that they're going to move their freight west to east, maybe towards the eastern seaboard to get more bang for the buck, so to speak? Or is their business as normal in those areas? What do you think?
Mark, I think that, remember, we also just concluded an agreement with the European Union. And that agreement is it's a 15% tariff, and as somebody was pointing out, 15% is 15%. It's bound to discourage business. So we've had the tariffs on the Asian side. We're also having them on the European side. And those are going to affect all coasts uniformly. I think that there won't be much of a difference. We're all going to experience higher prices and shortages of some goods.
And when you look at this overall, are you seeing maybe more investment that's going to be done domestically? And what I mean by that, about a story about potential South Korea investment in U.S. shipbuilding.
Yes.
What would this maybe bring to the table? Could we see some benefits on the other end of that?
Yes.
South Korea.
So, Mark, you're raising a good point. The South Korean shipbuilder Hanwha acquired Philly Shipyard in Philadelphia last year, and the promise is that they will bring Korean expertise and investment into that shipyard. At the same time, the Korean shipbuilder HD Hyundai has formed a partnership this year with a U.S. defense-focused shipbuilder Huntington Ingalls in Norfolk. And they build aircraft carriers, and they've joined forces to help them work on improving their expertise and production. At the same time, Edison Chuset Offshore, which is down in New Orleans, has signed an agreement with Hyundai to build new container ships in Tampa, I believe beginning in 2028. So those are positive signs. The problem, Mark, is that we really need new shipyards. Our shipyards are old. You remember Sparrows Point in Baltimore? Great shipyard many years ago, but it's these shipyards they're just not up to speed. The Samho shipyard in Korea is 850 acres. That has
enormous, to say the least. And when you look at this overall, Stas, from the initiative by the Trump administration, are they branding This says making American shipbuilding great again.
Yes.
Involving multi-billion-dollar investments here. How does the White House see that?
Well, I think that certainly President Trump has done a great deal to push the shipbuilding emphasis forward, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. The problem is always in the details, and in the details, a lot of our yards are older, they're smaller, they can't build out. We really need new shipyards, and now we're talking about $100 billion investment. There's some news that the administration is trying to get the Koreans to help fund some of that. We'll see if that happens. But there's a very complicated dynamic going on with these negotiations on trade, which is that we get an agreement and then things change, and then we get an agreement and then it changes. So it's really hard to tell what the long term is. It would be great if we had a long-term agreement with Korea to help us build new shipyards. I think that that's where the emphasis needs to be, Mark. And if President Trump can get us there, that would be great.
Well, let's do this, Stas. We're going to do a commercial break. And interesting. Great stuff. We're going to do the commercials. Drivers, love to get you on board. And love this conversation. I mean, the simple fact when you think about this trucking, being out there alone for years, a lot of people have thought, well, trucking is just trucking. It's a standalone. It's not. That's why we're such an interconnected industry when it comes to things like maritime, aviation, intermodal, the ports. Stas Margaronis is on with us, so we're going to break for a few and come back in a minute. Stay with us. More coming up. Right, Stas Margaronis is on with us, so we're going to break for a few and come back in a minute. Stay with us. More coming up right here on Sirius XM 1%.
Free with all of our trials and popular plans.
And, sir, thank you. Great to have you on. Pulling back the onion, peeling the onion, getting right to the core of the story. Tell folks where they can find you. Where can they read up on your great work? Where can they go?
www.ajot.com. That's www.ajot.com, Mark.
Okay, easy as that. And thank you very much for jumping into the conversation. You mentioned the European trade deal. And, the conflict that we've got in the Red Sea going on there, this is having a big effect on the maritime cycle. And I was going back on memory, I think the Houthis have announced that, any vessel that they suspect is helping Israel, they're going to attack it.
That's right.
So how do you see this? How do the recent Houthi maritime strikes threaten global freight, the insurance markets, that kind of a thing? What do you say?
Well, Mark, problem number one is that the U.S. Navy, according to the Naval Institute reports we saw 2 days ago, is not present in the Red Sea at the moment. And I think our presence needs to be there. As you may be aware, the Houthis attacked 2 Greek-owned ships sailing under Liberian flags, sinking both of them in early July. And they killed mariners, they've taken hostages, and as you pointed out, they said that they were going to resume attacks on commercial ships in the Red Sea if those ships have ties to companies that work with Israeli ports. The impact is that everybody who can is going around the African coast to get to Europe and to the United States and not using the Suez Canal. That lengthens the sailing time, it increases costs, and especially in the wintertime, it complicates shipping. So that situation is likely to continue. But at the same time, one of the side effects that we haven't been up to speed on is that the Chinese are now taking advantage of the situation in the Suez and going around Africa to start a new service. And the new service is a niche Chinese liner, Sea Legend Shipping, is going to launch a direct container service between China and Northern Europe via the North Sea route going through the North Pole. So this is one of the side effects that's happening. The Chinese are taking advantage of this to start running ships through the North Pole, and the sail time is 18 days as opposed to 30 to 50 days going around the Cape of Good Hope.
The interesting phenomenon about this as well, Stas, is that when the goods do eventually make their way to U.S. shores, that the ports are piling on, as some say, excessive fees with the goods. Case in point, National Industrial Transportation League has been on a program before talking about the ports doing a piling on effect, fee after fee after fee, in order to get the goods inbound, off the ship, and then loaded on. So what are you hearing from that standpoint? Can we expect more of a similar scenario with fees adding on? Ultimately, we all pay for that, right? Don't we?
Well, so the tariffs are the one thing that I'm aware of. The problem that we're concerned about here, I told you we've lost two of our big trucking companies in the Port of Oakland in the last 2 weeks. And that has to do with a lack of volume, a consistent volume. When things go up and down, right, it creates a problem. And especially if you're a family-owned business, you can't afford to have gyrations. And my concern, Mark, is that this is just the beginning. As you know, there's been a freight recession for a couple of years. Freight rates for trucking have been down. The harbor truckers have done better because the volumes had stayed up. But with the tariffs, that's no longer the condition, and we are very worried about our harbor truckers.
Yep, and then you think about that, where that's going to extend out with some of the companies closing down. That's going to have a direct impact on consumables purchased on the local level. And correct? Because yes, when you've got companies that are buying goods are getting paid through the ports, and if the trucking companies are not operating, doesn't that affect Main Street?
Of course.
Oakland as an example.
Of course. And your warehouses, if once the supply chain starts to get disrupted, you're talking about warehousing, you're talking about trucking, then your distribution lines get disrupted, then you no longer have the inventory that you thought you had. You start to see the shortages, and what you do have of things starts to get more expensive, all of which starts to spell inflation.
Yeah, I'm reading through a post here, like you mentioned, two very prominent companies shutting down. July 2025, Port of Oakland's maritime community experienced a shutdown shockwave when GSC, a prominent harbor trucking company, ceased all operations. Another one, Flex International, previously operated at the Port of Oakland, about Chapter 7 liquidation. September 2024, year after it ceased operations due to a revoked authority and canceled insurance. But, mentioning the fact that a couple of these companies have gone out, should this be on the radar for some of the other major ports out there? Port of Oakland, the Port of LA, Long Beach.
Everybody.
Port of San Diego.
Everybody.
Everybody. Okay. And expand on that. Everybody should worry, right?
Because if your trucking lines of communication start to go down, you're going to have a tougher time getting stuff out of the ports, and that's going to create a higher cost because there will be less trucking companies able to compete in the market. And my concern is the long-term supply chain begins to get disrupted with this. And as you know, a lot of our trucking companies, they're family. A lot of them are family owned, and they have limited resources, and they can't. This is tough for them to take. And if you have a freight recession, and now you start to have a supply recession, and things are disrupted, it's going to get tougher, and that's what we're worried about for the rest of the year. And you mentioned Christmas. That's something that we are likely to see a problem with.
Stas, I appreciate you joining me on the program. Got to get ready to wrap it up. Greatness. Thank you, Stas Margaronis on with me. And one more time, where can folks read up on you and your great work? Where can it go?
www.ajot.com. www.ajot.com. Thank you, Mark.
Very good, sir. We'll do it again.
Thank you.